Greetings. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace to people of goodwill. Really quick and no frills video here on a subject which perhaps many will find trivial, but which seemed to me to still be worth documenting. You see, there's a small social media collective. Some might call them a group of internet trolls, but there's this internet group, social media group, which calls itself the YaChaD. Now, there doesn't seem to even be 10 members in the group, so some might say that it's not even worth documenting. But on the other hand, because the members of that group are so extraordinarily belligerent and go around social media trying to pick these rather rude arguments with all sorts of people, it seemed to me to be worthwhile to create a video with some sort of introductory information, at least for those who encounter them and might be curious what their story is. So these individuals are the apparently erstwhile followers of a man who called himself Qana Lawah. So I often refer to them as Qanaites. And I say they are apparently erstwhile followers of Qana because Qana himself seems to have moved on with his life and may no longer be in contact with those who still describe themselves as his followers. Nonetheless, relevant to what you see on the screen and relevant to the title of this video, while the Qanaites vehemently deny this, they are nonetheless best described as an offshoot of the One West spectrum. You see, their murky beginnings seem to at least partly originate with Latinos who were imbibing One West ideology online, but who were also enraged by certain non-One West African-American Hebrew Israelites, pejoratively called quote-unquote Negro-only Israelites, who would tell them that they're not Israelites, right? And so that infuriated them, and it seems that their rage was subsequently assuaged when Qana Lawah came along and gave them a virtual Uno reverse card of sorts, which they found intoxicating. And that was basically the option of saying, I'm an Israelite and you're not, back at African-American Hebrew Israelites. So, they had to endure African-American Hebrew Israelites, certain ones, those who are not with One West, telling them they're not Israelites. And then, they suddenly had this intoxicating feeling of getting to say that in reverse. Now they go around telling African-Americans they're not Israelites, And so the Qanaites thus came to reject the One West tribes chart. And like I said, they gleefully spend their time going around the internet and telling African-Americans that they're Hamites, or more specifically Canaanites, right? And thus arose what some have called, quote-unquote, Latino-only Israelites, though some might object that the description's not entirely accurate, because apparently Qana may have accepted gypsies or Japanese or whatever. But, by the way, worthy of note, the leader of Sicarii, Al-Loya, years ago, he shared that from a One West perspective, he saw Isaiah 11:13 as relevant to this evolution. Some might find that interesting. But like I said, the Qanaites, or the remaining members of the YaChaD, deny any One West influence. And, they deny any past proximity to One West. And they try to argue that by noting how they differ from One Westers. For example, now they reject the New Testament. Moreover, their approach to Hebrew pronunciation is slightly different, and so on, right? And of course, they also reject the One West tribes chart. And with that in mind, because some of them might not be aware of their group's origins, and others are just not honest about it, I just wanted to quickly document the One West influences on the man they learned from, that being Qana Lawah. Now, as a disclaimer, in a vacuum, this need not be considered an issue, right? I don't intend this as a polemic against Qana. You see, lots of people believe all sorts of things in their lives, and people can grow and change. And like I said, I'm under the impression that Qana's moved on with his life, right? So this isn't a knock against Qana, but the reason I wanted to document this is because Qana's remaining followers on social media deny any One West influence on him, so it seemed worth documenting. Now, despite attempts by members of the YaChaD to emphasize the differences between them and One Westers, the reality is that the farther back you go into Qana's past, the more he has in common with One West. And so I wanted to quickly document some examples of that. Now, I've already covered one example in my video titled One West Influence on Qana Lawah. Awbaray is modified Lashawan Kundalini. And in that video, I note the obvious proximity of the system of Hebrew used by the Qanaites to Lashawan Kadash. But then I show that Qana even used to use the diacritics which One West developed. And for me, that alone is definitive. That's an obvious sign of One West influence on Qana. And it's one that his followers have never been able to address or explain. But I wanted to add a bit more to that for the record, and that's why I'm making this very quick and, no frills video, as I said. So first, jumping right in, first, while Qana later adopted the practice of referring to Israel as YaChaD, and he did that to distinguish him and his followers from One West, which calls Israel YaChaD. The reality is that a decade ago, back when Qana was calling himself Qadash, he was opening his videos with a reference to YaChaD, not Yashar-al, YaChaD. He was saying it the One West way. And I'll provide links to all these videos in the description. But here, consider a couple of examples of how he was opening his videos a decade ago.
Alright, Shalom Israel, Shalom Yasharallah, it's your boy Qadash, Yasharawan, back at it again, man. Shalom Israel, Shalom Akyam, Shalom Yasharallah, man, it's your boy Qadash, back at it again.
Another relevant bit of trivia is that while Qana came to reject the New Testament, that was not always the case with him. He's on record admitting that there was a time when he adhered to the New Testament.
Bridge right here. Cambridge, that Bible cost me a pretty penny. I was back when I was still in the New Testament.
Now, some might think that he just meant that he used to be a Christian, but no, not really. You see, by his own admission, there was a time when he was trying to play these One West style games, like denying that the virgin birth is affirmed by the New Testament.
So they make this birth of Christ, this virgin birth, because that's what it is. A lot of camps, I've seen a couple camps try to spin it. Oh, it's not virgin birth. It's not talking about virgin birth. No, it's a virgin birth. It's a virgin birth. I've heard you guys try to spin it. I used to spin it myself. It's not, man. Let's just call it for what it is. This is the virgin birth, man. This is the Christ God. This is the Christ child. Right?
And perhaps most significant of all, his old videos show a time when he was closer to the One West tribes chart. Now, again, recall that his group adopted the practice of telling African Americans that they're all a bunch of Hamites. But there was a time when he was using One West slogans and including African Americans, or more specifically the descendants of slaves, the descendants of victims of the transatlantic slave trade, as Israelites. He was including them among Israel.
Well, we are the real Hebrew Israelites of the Bible, so-called Negro, Native American, Hispanic, Japanese or Hebrews. We're scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Basically, if your forefathers went into slavery through ships, and your ass is getting beat by the white man and you're poor, you're pretty much a Hebrew. Deuteronomy 28 is where you find your curses. If you fit those curses, then you fit the Hebrews.
Now, with that in mind, it's also worth noting a clip from an old video by Al-MaseeHee, in which he showed a private message from Qana, which Qana sent him over Facebook back in 2016. And in that private message, Qana described his own paternal great-grandfather, which is to say his father's father's father, as quote-unquote black, as quote-unquote a slave, as quote dark as F, I'm not going to use the profane word that he used, end quote, and possessing, quote, a nose as wide as a highway, end quote. Now, forgive the language. These are not my words. Those are the words that Qana used to describe his paternal great-grandfather.
Watch out. Qana Lawah, boy, you should, man, Yahweh's against you, nigga. It's crazy. Even though I have a majority native blood, but that's according to a DNA test, which he admitted. And my wife is pure native. My son has an afro, and I had an afro, and my father has one, and his pops was black. But all we know is he was brought from Mexico to New Mexico as a slave to build churches in the Manzano Apple Mountains. He was dark as fuck and had a nose wide as a highway, but he mixed with Aztec, and their son mixed with Apache, and they produced my pops, then me. Again, this nigga just said that his great-grandfather is a Negro.
So, having seen all that, let's do a quick recap summing up what was covered here. First, Qana used to refer to Israel as Yashar-Allah, like One West does. So before he started saying Yashar-al, he used to say Yashar-Allah. Second, Qana used to adhere to the New Testament. And by his own admission, when he did adhere to the New Testament, there was a period where he would engage in the mental gymnastics of trying to deny the virgin birth is affirmed by the New Testament, just like One West. Third, Qana used to affirm that Israelites are, quote, so-called Negroes, Native Americans, Hispanics, end quote. And he also said that, quote, if your forefathers went into slavery in ships, end quote, then you're a Hebrew. And fourth, relevant to that third point, around the same time, Qana felt the need to try to convince Al-Azhar that he descended from a black slave, right? That was apparently his attempt to get in on the Israelite sweepstakes back then. Now, of course, we can take his description of his paternal great-grandfather with a grain of salt, but the point is what it says about his mindset and how all of that fits together. And finally, fifth, as was alluded to earlier and covered in a previous video, Qana taught his followers a slight adaptation of Lashawan Qadash, and he even once used One West's diacritics, which for me, again, is definitive. It's an obvious sign of One West influence on him. Now, when you put it all together, the One West influence on Qana Lawah is, like I said, undeniable, right? It's indisputable. Now, I realize others might find all this trivial, but because members of the YaChaD deny this part of their leader's past, I thought it was worth documenting. And again, this isn't intended as a knock against Qana himself. Like I said, he's apparently moved on with his life, but this is for his remaining followers who still try to deny this. And this is also for anyone who encounters them and might want to know the truth about the group's origins. That's all. So simply put, the YaChaD is akin to an offshoot of One West, though not in the sense of like former members of formal groups, who broke away. Rather, they're an offshoot of One West in the sense of people who were influenced by One West groups online over the internet and then started making changes to what they adopted from those One Westers online, right? But with that, I'll close this video here. I hope at least some find this interesting. Feel free to share any comments, questions, or criticisms, and God bless.